Hello game trollers and welcome to a new video and welcome to my mid-series review for series 12. Man, it's kind of weird saying that. It's been a long time and we're finally here. We're finally well in the middle of this series. This review, I'm gonna give my overall thoughts on sort of each episode individually, well, each story individually, and kind of give my sort of thoughts and opinions on where the series could go, what sort of have been set up, the little details that have kind of been, coming back and stuff. So, yeah, anyways, let's get on to sort of my thoughts on each episode. So, I'm gonna start off with the worst episode. Easily the worst episode of just this 5-episode run. Hopefully, the worst episode in just the series in general. Because I feel like with the finale and then episode 8 and 7, I feel like you can't fail there. Like the only one I'm willing to let fail is Praxeus, but hopefully Praxeus is better than Orphan 55. Hopefully the worst episode of the series. It's written by Ed Heim, which is a major disappointment. I think probably one of the biggest disappointments of this series is just how bad that already pretty divisive, and I feel like Orphan 55 is kind of divisive, but I feel like it's one of those episodes that's like you like loving monsters or fear her. This doesn't make it a good episode. It's kind of one of those episodes where okay, fine, you can like it, but it's not a very good episode. So yeah, I don't really even know what to say about this episode, honestly. It's just so right. So let me start off with the positives, just sort of get them out of the way. I feel like some of the Ed Heim isms, which is basically just doing weird stuff just for no particular reason other than doing weird stuff, like the frog, was back, and because I was ready for it, I really liked them. I liked how, horrible that costume was for that cat lady or squirrel lady or whatever she was. I just liked how they just opened the episode mopping up tentacle goo. I thought that was incredible. Just the comedy was pretty good in it too. And while the pacing is kind of something I'm mixed on, because I do like the fast pacing of it. I like how just it just felt like we were just steamrolling through the story, because I watch a lot of classic. I've been watching a lot of classic Who, and just TV shows in general can be very slow. So I kind of just like where I can just put it on for 45 minutes and feel like I was there for 20 minutes, because it just went so fast. But that is also kind of a problem with the episode, but I'll get into problems later. I felt like specifically 13 was probably one of her stronger performances. Obviously, most of Series 12, she's just been pretty good, specifically in a couple episodes, which I'll mention. But, yeah, I feel like she was pretty decent in this episode, specifically in, mostly in, the first 10 or so minutes. Then afterwards, she kind of just fell a bit off, especially the speech at the end. I felt like Jodie was doing good performance-wise, just the speech itself. We'll get to that. And the companions weren't that great, but I feel like they were pretty decent. Ryan had stuff to do, he had the whole romance. They gave the companions stuff to do, at least Ryan. And they were they were bearable. They were nice. They were entertaining. But yeah, Jodie and the 13 and those first 5 to 10 minutes, however long that was great. Just the whole when Yaz was hey, hopefully this gets you out of your mood, and then she's just completely cold and dead, just I haven't got a mood. That was great. No, she was my mood's fine. That was great. And then the whole Hopper virus, Ryan seeing birds, that was amazing, and she was great in that scene. And then the whole with some crayons and half a can of Spam, I could make you from scratch. That is probably one of the best Doctor lines we've had in I don't know how long. That's up there, right, with that bit in Eaters of Light, which is weird. The Doctor always has really good lines in bad episodes. I feel like that's a trend. But like in the Eaters of Light, when he's like, "You hear that? That's my patience breaking into a tiny million pieces." That was great. So yeah, it's kind of up there with that line in terms of just like quotable, just mean lines that the Doctor has had. And she was a lot more. So she wasn't as jokey. She wasn't that sort of goofy. Like she wasn't cringe. I don't necessarily have a problem with her being goofy. It's just the cringy way she does it in like series 11 and like Spyfall Part 1 was like the problem. But in Orphan 55 she was pretty good. I guess sometimes the episode looked nice. I can't like. There were a couple scenes where it's like there. Okay, my biggest problem with Orphan 55. Let's get into the problems. This episode had a lot of potential. I think it's the biggest issue. It had a lot of potential. Like Edheim, like there was a story in there that could have been good. Like you could have done something good with the episode, but like the way it just was executed, I'm not sure if it was like last minute changes to the script or like if just the production side of things were just like was off, or the post production, like, or like maybe just Edheim was like they told him, okay, do this story, like we're doing a story about like global warming and it's set in the future where it's like showing you a bad future if global warming happens, blah blah blah. And it was like, okay, I'll try to do that, but like it didn't feel it felt like maybe he was trying to write that, but like he didn't at the same. I don't know what happened with this episode. Basically, another big issue is just the ending, like the whole global warming message. Like, it's weird. I don't necessarily disagree. Like, global warming is a bad thing. We should do something about it, right? But like, just the whole, like, I hate preaching this. I hate like when something is like telling you like there's a problem or that you should do something. I really hate that. I really hate when like they do that in like episodes like Black Mirror. Like some of the good episodes of Black Mirror, like they really are good at like just showing you stuff. They don't need to tell you whatever is bad. They just show you that it's bad, you know? You don't need to say, "Oh, global warming is bad. We should do something about it." You're going to turn into these things, which by the way, that ending to the episode is like probably like the funniest moments in Doctor Who history, which is like, be the best of humanity, and it's like, oh, and then the sting. Like honestly, that was hilarious. How just like I can't even complain about the ending. Like I don't even think it's like bad. It's just so funny how it's done. I think it's just they want you to take it seriously, but it's so just like the editing and just the idea of it is so ridiculous. It's like, come on now. And just like another issue is just how the ending. Again, most of my issues were with the ending. It's how the ending of like the speech and just how 13 doesn't go back and rescue those people and then just says like, oh, it's an alternate timeline. If you don't fix your stuff and blah blah blah, this will happen. But it kind of just makes the whole episode feel kind of pointless because it's like, okay, so if we do save the world, none of this would happen. None of these characters will exist, or at least exist in the state that they are. You know, it's kind of like it's kind of like the problem with like Last of the Time Lords. Like people have the problem of how they do the whole reverse time thing and like, oh, none of that year happened, none of those people died, the Master didn't rule over Earth for a year and didn't torture people and blah blah blah. But like the thing is, of course, is that the story isn't about just the Earth and the people on Earth. It's about our characters, and our characters they still remember everything. They still suffered all the consequences of what happened. Whereas here, it's like, well, we're never gonna be on that Earth. Technically, it doesn't really matter. Like, I don't feel like any of the TARDIS team really care about what happened. Like, I don't think they is like gonna affect them too much. It's not their Earth. They're not gonna beat like it doesn't it's kind of lacking in that sort of like, it's an alternate timeline, but like it doesn't really have an effect because everything's supposedly gonna change if we are good, blah blah blah. And it's kind of just a problem with this this sort of era where it's really pessimistic. Like, it's weird because like 13 herself, they treat her as like this really optimistic, like, oh, it's basically like her whole tenure has been like the where there's tears there's hope stuff from series 10. That's basically her whole thing, is like, oh, hope, like Nazis, they won't sustain, whatever she was talking about in Serenga, I'm the doctor of hope, all that stuff. It's like, yeah, and then just the actual show and everything and how the story goes down and everything is like super pessimistic, like humans are bad, the bad things is like, ugh. So yeah. Also, just another issue with Orphan 55. The characters are atrocious. Like, just it's not. I can't say I have a problem with the amount of characters necessarily. Like, you could do something interesting. Like, it's not like, oh, the fact that it's got a large cast of characters is a problem. It's the fact that they just like they tried doing too much with each character, but like it never stuck. Like, it was like, hey, here's this daughter mother thing that will only happen that will only be relevant for another scene. Oh, here's this father and his engineer's son who there's a running gag about how the father can't fix things and the son is better at engineering. That only really happened towards the end and just it won't be funny after the first time, blah blah blah. And also Benny and his wife, which I can't remember the name of. I mean, specifically the wife is like the worst actor that's been on the show, and just like it's been like like I'm saying about the whole alternate reality thing. Like, if you do the whole like none of this is gonna happen, so technically you shouldn't care about these characters. At least you could at least try to make us care about these characters, because honestly, besides the TARDIS team, I really could have just done with all of them dying. Like, I don't care. They could have all died. And it doesn't, like, I'm not mad at 13 for not going back to save the Kane, Laura Fraser, Lydia from Breaking Bad. Is going back to save her and her daughter, considering, like, I don't really care about their safety anyway, so the fact that 13 doesn't go and rescue them is, like, fine. You know? Yeah. So the cast of characters, they're just really badly done with. Like, you could have a large cast of characters and actually do something interesting with them. But yeah, and another problem is the pacing, of course. Like, I think where the issues lie, basically the first 10 to 15 minutes of the episode could have been the whole episode in and of itself. Sure, it would have been kind of average, kind of basic, but like, it doesn't really matter if it's basic as long as it's decent and good. Like, I don't have a problem with, say, like Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror is kind of basic. It's kind of like a basic, like, oh, here's some aliens, they're bad, they want something, blah blah blah, we're not gonna give it to them, we're gonna defeat them. But it's very basic, it's a very average episode. Like, it's like it hits all the beats that it needs to hit while not hitting any extra. It doesn't go to above and beyond what it's trying to do. And it's like, you could have just done that with Orphan 55. You could have just had the there are monsters and attacking the spa, and like they're breaking through the walls, and the climax of the episode is 13 activating the blah blah blahs, and maybe we get a little epilogue of like like you could have done it where you had all that, and like, I don't know. I guess like the big part of the episode is just the whole, yeah, it's a desolate wasteland outside, and you go out and you see it and blah blah blah, and then it's like, oh, it's Earth, so it's this desolate wasteland. If we don't do, like, I get that's probably the point of the episode. So like, if you cut out them actually going outside, that is an issue. You could have reworked around it. Like, maybe you could have had like 30 minutes to, like, yeah, I guess 30 minutes sort of dedicated to all that. Maybe like, I don't know, 25 or so minutes dedicated to just them being inside the spa, surviving the dregs, everybody's dying. You could have drawn that out a little more, actually shown the dregs killing people. You know, you could have done a little bit more. Like, you could have had Kane's daughter actually try blowing up. Like, you could have done a little bit more there. You know, actually draw out them actually going to the spot, because another big issue is the whole, as soon as they get there, the monsters attack and blah. Like the excuse they always have for that on the show is like, oh, the TARDIS takes them to like the point where there's more action, or the place where they're needed the most, right? So, but the TARDIS is literally the most useless part of the episode. It does nothing. It's just there in the beginning and the end, just as background. It does nothing. So, they use the cube, which, by the way, I don't know how this magical cube managed to take them to an alternate future where the Earth is destroyed. I don't know how that happened. They don't really explain how they got to that point. Maybe it's like just the cube was tied to that alternate future or something, but they don't really explain it. So you kind of just have to make the assumption yourself. And it's like one of those times where that's not really a plus. And yeah, so that whole, like, as soon as they get the monster attack, that's just bad writing. It's like you could have drawn it out a little bit more. Like, 10 minutes of them just doing spa stuff, doing little fun stuff, like having more of like those Hopper virus, Ryan seeing birds thing. You could have done more of that, right? Then get an extra like 15, maybe 20 minutes of the dregs attacking the spa, and like learning the mystery, learning the backstory of like this planet and stuff through just Kane interacting with the Doctor while also saving the people. You could have done that. Then maybe like, you see, another thing is like, yeah, you could cut down the cast, right? And then instead of having Benny and the old lady, you could have had one of the TARDIS team get kidnapped. You know, like you could have made it that Graham got kidnapped, right? Then you could have had like an extra bit where like Ryan not only has this romantic interest, but he also has like this worried thing with like where he's like completely worried about Graham's safety. Maybe you could have had Ryan get taken away, and then you could have like the whole everybody, like Graham is worried that his grandson is almost dead, which they did in the episode, but like for all of like 2 minutes, when like Ryan was like somewhere in the spa and like Graham was running around the spa looking for him. You could have done that where Ryan actually gets kidnapped and taken away, and you could have stretched out like Graham's stress a little bit more, where he's like, we need to save Ryan, for I can't disgrace Grace like this, that kind of thing. And then you could have had like Yaz, like she could add a little bit of character, like, oh, I'm Ryan's like my brother, blah blah blah. I never gave him my sister's number. You could have done something there. You could have had also the romantic interest be like, give a little bit of stuff with her, right? Maybe develop the interest with the relationship between her and Ryan, like have her sort of abandon Ryan to be kidnapped, and then have her sort of be like, basically be the Kane of the episode, where everybody's like mad at her because she like let Ryan go, and like the guilt is killing her now. You could have done some stuff there. You could have had like one of the TARDIS team get kidnapped, Then like you could have actually seen the dregs, maybe like you could follow Ryan in like a couple scenes of like the dregs dragging him away to like go feast on him or whatever, and like he's afraid. Could have done a little bit more there. Like, I'm just saying, the episode could have been good. You just had to pull certain things away and push something in. Yeah. What else do I have to say? Not much. Yeah, the plot was rushed, because it's just like the first 15 minutes was super rushed, and then they tried stretching out the plot while also rushing it at the same time, because like they stretched it out, but they realized they stretched it out a little too much, so they had to like rush through it a little bit and like compress it. But it was, yeah, it was, 155 is a mess. 4 out of 10, because as I said, the performance from the TARDIS team was good. It looked nice, and I kind of just give it some points for at least the potential, and it also is like somewhat of just like a turn off your brain and watch this kind of episode, ignoring the whole like global warming speech. You can't just like turn off your brain. It's like, okay, it's like arachnids or like loving monsters in that sense. But yeah, I'm giving Orphan 55 a 4 out of 10. Now we go on to my third favorite story of the series, being Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. As I said, pretty basic, bog standard. Like this is like mid-series, like early to mid-series RTD style episode. It's like there's a historical figure, there's some aliens, there's some fun action. It's very like, it doesn't do too much for like the overall arc. It like doesn't necessarily grow any of the characters really. Like I don't feel like I don't feel like the Doctor or the companions really grew as people, or like just the main characters through their experience in this episode. But at the same time, it is just a fun episode that's like well done. It's well structured, well paced. It's just a really functional story that's really entertaining and really rewatchable, and like does everything well. Yeah, like it just I have no problems with the episode particularly. Like I'm fine with like everything. Like there's nothing I'm really even mad on necessarily. Like I like everything. I think it's good. It's not above and beyond anything. It's just good. So getting into it, so we have sort of 13, who I think is great in this episode. As I said, Orphan 55, she was pretty good, but like this episode especially, she was like really good because she was kind of bloodthirsty when she was actually kind of interacting with the Queen, like especially at the end. I'm really talking about the end when like she does that whole like your time is up now, there's just gonna be a trail of blood and other people's brilliance that you stole and blah blah blah, and like the way she like tricks Skifra into like teleporting herself back to the ship so like Tesla could kill her. Like I really like that. It was very Seventh Doctor in a way, which I'm perfectly fine with. And it also kind of like, what's the word for it? It's not necessarily foreshadows. Kind of leads into what happens in Fugitive with the Doctor, if you catch my drift, where like you see kind of the savagery and the badness, the evilness of the malice of the Doctor in a way. But yeah, throughout she was also pretty good. Like as I said, the comedy with her, like her jokes, her dialogue was really good throughout most of the episode. She wasn't babbling on too much. And I kind of do want to address this with the Doctor. I've never had an issue with the Doctor overusing the screwdriver, as long as it's like not like it's not like the thing that wins the plot necessarily. What was it? Power Free is like one of the big examples of the screwdriver being bad, because it's like screwdriver this thing, and oh boy, everybody's done. The Shakri's dead. The plot is over. Woohoo, screwdriver. Like that's the issue there. But like her just waving it around, doing nonsense, scanning people that she probably doesn't need to scan. Like I like how the joke in Twice Upon a Time is of like Capaldi using the sunglasses of the Sonic to like investigate the Glass Woman, and like Cardinal, the first Doctor was like, put that thing away and just look at the woman. And so and then the last two series after that is 13 using the Sonic for everything, for stuff she probably doesn't need to. That's great. I love that. I love how that's just completely not followed upon at all. It's proven why First Doctor reacted that way. But I don't necessarily have a problem with her using the screwdriver all the time. It's just whenever she like, I don't think she's ever even used it necessarily to fix the plot. Like I don't think there's been an episode it's like she used a screwdriver at a point where where it just feels like cheating, like she just wins the plot with the screwdriver. I don't think she's ever done that necessarily. To be honest, this episode was probably one of the examples of that, where she like uses a screwdriver to activate the teleportation thing that sends the Queen back to her ship. But besides that, yeah, so I don't have a problem with the screwdriver. And yeah, as I said, 13 is excellent in this episode. I don't really have any problems with her. She's the most bearable she's been in that episode. She was just really good. The companions, just throughout most of the series, like I said, like Orphan 55, like Ryan had a little bit to do, but like Grimm and Yaz kind of fell back. This episode is kind of like, they kind of all fell back in a little way, like not like to a huge amount where like they're completely pointless to the story. Like they kind of are your eyes, like whenever Yaz had that scene with like Tesla, or when like Yaz and Tesla got teleported to the ship. Like mainly Yaz is just there to be our sort of POV into that scene, where like you can't, like they're just not gonna show Tesla and the Queen doing stuff. Like they had Yaz there to sort of be our eyes there, which is, I think, is a good use of companions, is just to not even really be a point, like a use to the plot, but at least just letting us see stuff, I guess. So I kind of like that, and like how like each of them kind of had their own thing. Like Yaz was more with Tesla, Ryan was more with Miss Scarrett, Tesla's assistant, and Graham was more with Edison. And like you're seeing some scenes with them, like them bouncing off. They were more focused with those characters than anything else. And Force 13 kind of was more with Tesla, and the Queen specifically. She was more like, like she was more focused. She was more grouped up. Like I like how the writing, as I said, was like really just on a technical level, a masterpiece, where they kind of just grouped up characters with each other, just sort of to have scenes with them and stuff. I like how they did that. So yeah, so I didn't necessarily think the companions really did much. I did like some of the scenes with Ryan and Graham. They were kind of just like they were just kind of the brutes. They were, well, not the brutes, but like they were like what's the word for? They were basically the stormtroopers from the last episode of The Mandalorian. That's basically my best way to describe them. They're just kind of there just to sort of be some comic relief and kind of just be the guys, the muscle, if you would, if the need ever arises and stuff. But yeah, and talking about the side characters, I thought the side characters were also really good in this episode. There weren't too many, which is, I guess a plus as well. Or unlike Orphan 55. Tesla. Oh my goodness. Tesla, I think, is probably my favorite historical figure in this show. He was just amazing. Like, the acting to the writing, like, he actually felt like a person, That's the best part. He kind of felt like a person. They did sort of glorify him a bit too much, but at the same time, it is Nikola Tesla, so, fair enough. And they kind of do that with historical figures in general anyway, so it doesn't really matter. They never really show every facade of every historical figure. They just kind of use a certain, like, okay, this is our interpretation of him, and this is what you would be led to believe. They didn't talk about like how he was a eugenicist. They don't talk about that. They could have easily talked about that, especially in this era of the show, but they didn't. So yeah, I like Tesla. I think he was, as a character, he was great. As a representation of Tesla, he was pretty good. Not necessarily the best, but he was pretty good. And Edison kind of was a bit less because he kind of treated him more as like a caricature in some places. Like, he did feel like a person, like there was that bit with the guy that was working for him that like got killed by the scorpions, and he was like, oh, I went to dinner with him and stuff like that. And he did have some human moments. He was just kind of, he did have human moments. He was just kind of also a bad person. This is kind of the way they portrayed him. Not necessarily like, obviously he probably was a bad person in real life too. Like some of the stories they do tell about how like he didn't pay Tesla for fixing the generator or whatever. That was a real story. Like, I actually looked that up. It was a real story. I even heard it before the episode, so that's just, I do my research. So yeah, so I Edison was kind of just like, hey, he's just bad, and Tesla was like, oh, he's just good. But I feel like, at least in the episode, they were done well, and it also was good just from a thematic level, because it was also kind of like, you kind of compared the Queen to Edison in a way, where like Edison was just using other people's ideas to like make his own stuff, kind of like how, like, he was pilfering ideas from other people to use as his own, kind of like how the Queen was using other people's technologies as her own and claimed it as her own and stuff like that. It was kind of like a good, it was one of those well done those times where it's like well done with like the thematic, like, oh, here's some, it's like a mirror, blah blah blah. I liked it. The Queen and her Scorpion Skifra army, they were pretty good. Was a bit generic. She kind of was like, was a mix of like the Ragnos Queen and the Morax Queen from, well, was she an empress or a queen? I think she was a queen. The Ragnos Queen and the Morax Queen from Witchfinders. She was kind of like a mix of them, but like with the whole scavenger thing where they're using other people's technologies. I did like that. I feel like in future they could explain. I feel like like, I didn't like the ending necessarily where like they just escape, because I feel like of all the times where you could just kill a villain, like, why don't you just let it be dead? But at the same time, I do feel like, in future there's potential for like her and like the army to come back and stuff like that. I feel like it's one of those times where it's like, okay, fine, you could bring her back. You know, you could do more with the Skiffer, because I do think the whole idea of them using other people's technology, I always want that. Like, that's one of my things in like Doctor Who and just sci-fi in general. It's just like, you have all these aliens, you can't bring them all back at the same time or all the time. So you could have this one alien that uses their technology, so you could sort of reference them, or like use a cool like part of that certain monster's sort of mythos without needing to bring them back, like the Silurian gun. You know, you could do more with the Skiffer. You know, you could use them for references. Basically, that's like their point. So I do like them from that sense. I really like them from that sense. They were a bit generic. They were like, oh, here's some scorpions running after them, but they did their they were serviceable. They did their job. They weren't bad. You know, they were good villains. So yeah. And also, I really liked the setting. I thought I just really like that aesthetic. Just sort of the old sort of, well, not Victorian. I guess it's called Gilded Age in America. Like that whole like late 1800s, early 1900s sort of vibe they had going. I really liked. Kind of gave me Red Dead Redemption 2 flashbacks, if I'm being honest. But yeah. That's Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. An 8 out of 10. I'm very tempted to give it an 8.5 because I really do like it. But as I said, it doesn't go above and beyond anything. It just does what it needs to do. You know, the action is good, dialogue is good, the plot is well paced and well fleshed out. The villains are decent. Everything is good in it, so I can't really complain. But anyways, next we get to the big one. Well, one of the big ones. We get to Spyfall. I'm including this as one single story, but if I were doing this as sort of episodes, I'd have part 1 between Orphan 55 and Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, and then I have part 2 right here, basically. Like, this is where part 2 would sit. Is in this spot. The ratings are a bit different. I'll kind of give my individual ratings for each episode and then the overall rating. So, Spyfall was a good series opener. I thought it was a strong series opener, just as an opening 2-parter, kind of introducing some ideas while also just having a story that's like not necessarily gonna overshadow anything, but still feels kind of big and kind of important that it should be in the opener. I feel like Spyfall was good. Most of my problems kind of or kind of in part 1, and like they kind of bleed through part 2, and like part 2 kind of makes them worse in some ways. Specifically, I must say the Doctor in part 1 was just not good. Like, I'm not gonna say she was unbearable. I do think she wasn't as, like, I do feel she was better than she was in series 11, but like she was like between the good episodes and her good performances in series 11 and the bad. Like, she was in between the good and the bad of series 11, if you catch my drift. She was kind of just like, here's the series 11 13, where she's kind of goofy and cringy. Yeah, I didn't like her in part 1. She just felt like the series 11 13, which I did not like my least favorite Doctor. So yeah, I did have my problems for her in part 1. Part 2 though is where she really started to shine. Like, that was the start of like me liking 13, and actually her having a streak of good performances and good bits where she's written and having sort of good dialogue in places. The dialogue was still kind of rough in part 2. But I feel like that's just kind of like a Chibnall problem. Like, a lot of the story, like, if it were done by another showrunner, or even just another writer in general, would have been a lot better if it just didn't have the hands of Chibnall on it. Like, I feel like he had a good thing going, but just because of the way and his style he writes, it kind of just fell a bit off, and especially in part 1, where like his comedy is just not good. Like, I don't really get his humor in some places. Sometimes his humor is decent. Even in series 11, sometimes his humor was kind of decent. Not all the time though, which is where the problem is. Like most of the time, I just don't find the jokes kind of funny. Like I would laugh, but mostly because they were so like cringy or so bad. I was like, my gosh, this is exactly what I need in my life. Just such bad jokes that they want us to take seriously. You know, yeah. I did yeah, part one was decent. Like I didn't think it was crazy. Like I definitely disagree with people that part one is better than part two. I think that's probably my hottest take of the series. That part one was not as good. It wasn't as good as part two in any way, in my opinion. I did feel like as a part one of just a story, I feel like it did its job really well. Like as a part one, I thought it was really good. The problem, of course, in part two is, let's get into sort of the story. So the Kasavan. Let me start off with the Kasavan. Second biggest disappointment after Ed Heim's just atrocious writing, or at least atrociously doctored writing, I guess. The Kasavan, like in the series trailer, you saw them like sort of phasing into the TARDIS, and like they were like these imposing figures, and like, oh, I thought they were gonna be in the family, but then they were in the opener, so it was like, okay, fine, it's still decent, you know. There's still a good thing you could do here, right? I thought they would be like the big bads, of course they weren't. Especially in part one, I thought they were really good. Like all the scenes with Kasavan. Like I think my favorite part of part one was like that whole sequence of like Ryan and Yaz being in Barton's office, and like they're doing the investigating thing while it was like nighttime in the outback with 13 and the Master and and Graham, and like the Kasavans started attacking them. They killed the security people. You know, there's the whole action sequence of like the Kasavan sort of attacking. It's really good. I really like it. It was well directed. It's like written decently well, even though there are some issues there still, like how, like some inconsistencies, but I guess sort of get answered, but not really when you realize, when they kind of reveals the Master, right? Like how does he have all this technology? Why can't he randomly trap this thing, even though we've established they can phase through TARDISes? You know, like there was a lot of like bits where it's like, that doesn't make much sense. But I guess like if they were working with the Master, I guess in some way like you could sort of, I don't know. There was just a lot of issues with just the episode, especially like after the Master reveal. Like you kind of realize like, well, that doesn't make much sense. Like they do say like, oh, the Master was the one that killed O, but it's like, why? Like, I guess maybe it was like as soon as 13 called him, he realized O got the doctor to, I mean not O, C got the doctor to like enlisted the doctor's help, so like I guess he went to try and kill them so that the doctor wouldn't stop his plans. I guess maybe when he got the message from the doctor was when he like actually started to go after the doctor. But then the other issue is like, okay, what about beforehand? Like, there's just a lot of stuff with like this Master, like in terms of just the background that I have problems with. Performance wise, let's get to the Master. Fantastic. I love the Master in the story, especially in part 2. And like even in cliffhanger of part 1, when he's just like, you really think I would not make that sonic proof, Doctor? Like that was great. And he just in part 2 he was just excellent. Just the whole kneel and say my name, and then the choking her out. Like he actually felt like a menace. He actually felt like a villain, which was the biggest issue with series 11. None of the villains really did anything, you know. Like Krasko was like the closest, but like he had the whole he can't attack people, so he was basically not even a threat, like a physical threat. Like this Master, like he had layers of threats, you know. So yeah. Yeah, I really like this Master. I think he's performed excellently, and I even think Criminal actually did a decent job writing him. As a villain of the episode, I don't think he wasn't done like actually in the episode. Like his part of the episode, I don't think was actually that strong. Like he kind of felt a bit tacked on to the whole Spyfall plot with the Kasavan and Daniel Barton, who Daniel Barton I really just don't like. I don't really like him. He's just like, I hope we see more of him, but like we probably aren't. So yeah, he's just not very good. And there's also just some stuff where like the whole him making them wanted and like him killing his mom because I guess he just has a resentment for his mom that they only really put in like a scene. They never really mention it before, really. Like I think there was a vague like scene like during the bit where like Ryan and Yaz were interviewing him, and he like maybe mentioned his mom there, but like besides that, kind of just came out of nowhere. It's like, hey, I hate my mom, so I'm gonna kill her. It's like, okay, I guess that makes you evil then. Yeah, he was just not he was not good. The Kasavan had potential, and just as sort of a presence, they were definitely worked. Like they were definitely a good threatening presence. They were kind of along the lines of like the Fajarians, where they kind of felt threatening, but they, unlike the Fajarians who ended up being good, the Kasavan just ended up not doing anything really, especially in part 2. They were really bad in part 2. Like I'll just admit it, they were bad in part 2. They weren't good in part 2. Part 1 they were pretty good. There was a mystery to them. You know, they were killing people. Had like a threat level. You know, like there was like we don't even know if they're around. There was a good stuff with the Kasavan part 1, like just as a setup, but then part 2 they kind of just ended up being just these things that showed up whenever you needed them to show up, and then you just take them out when you don't need them to be there. They were just not good in part 2. I feel like as just a villain in general, I don't think the Kasavan were done well, although there was potential there, like Orphan 55, I guess. But yeah, the Kasavan weren't very good. I didn't like Daniel Barton. The Master was fantastic, and the Doctor was also really, really good in part 2. Like the Doctor and Master scenes were like primo in part 2. And also, I just really liked part 2, just what they were doing. Like I don't know. The Spyfall part of it kind of lets it down a little bit. Like I feel like if you separated the whole, or maybe you just got rid of Barton's character in general, and just you had the Master be Barton, and like maybe reveal that he was the Master throughout the episode. Maybe, possibly, you could have done something there. I don't know. There's just, I guess maybe it was like how Doctor defeated him with the Nazis, like, and he couldn't beat. I don't know. There's some moving parts of the episode where like it kind of falls apart a little bit, but as a whole, I do think it's pretty good. I really do like Spyfall. Like I have my issues with it. I've honestly talked about them, but like it's very it's like evolving with like my issues and my praises with the episode. With the story, so I don't know. I just really like Spyfall. I thought it was a good series opener, and it kind of introduced things that I think was good, like the whole destroying Gallifrey. Actually seeing Gallifrey again, that was exciting. The actual bringing back of the Timeless Child stuff that we thought they dropped, but I guess they didn't. And like just all that, I think is pretty good. I think it's done well. It's probably one of Chibnall's better scripts, at least him as a single writer. And yeah, so two of Chibnall's better scripts, I guess. So yeah, part 1 I give a 7 out of 10. I feel like dropping it to a 6.5, but I don't know. I do think it's pretty decent. Yeah. Also, I forget it. I guess it's kind of a given, but Saguna Akinola's score in just this series has been excellent, especially in like Nikola Tesla. Like that was another part of Nikola Tesla I forgot to mention. The music in that episode is like some of the best we've had since Murray Gold left, and even then, it's some of the best we had just in general. Like, honestly, you know, like the end of Series 10 had some great scores, but like compared to like the rest of Series 10 or like the rest of Series 9, and like some episodes in like Series 8, the score was like peaking in Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. Just like, it was so good. Like, just the action scenes were completely amplified, just... It was great, and like the Queen Skiffer was like even more of a threat. She actually had more of a presence just because of her theme of just like the screeching violins. That was great. But yeah, and the music in part 1 was really good. Part 2, give or take, I guess, wasn't that great in part 2. But like part 1, like the Master's theme and just that whole just the bit, like the cliffhanger music as soon as like all the stuff starts going down, like da da da, and so all that was great, and just the whole like doing 13's theme in like a James Bond style, that was great when they were like doing the walking scene. It was all good. I like the music in the episode. So yeah, 7 out of 10 for Spyfall Part 1, and an 8.5 out of 10 for Spyfall Part 2. Didn't really explain it, but I'm kind of running out of time, and we gotta get on this next episode, Fugitive of the Judoon, which is the most controversial one for me here, because as an episode, it's probably one of the best episodes in just Doctor Who in general. Like, I even say, like, it's up there. Like, I think it's actually on par as just an episode with World Enough in Time and the Doctor Falls, and then, like, before that, Heaven Sent. And then before Heaven Sent, like, Day of the Doctor. Like, it's up there as just a singular episode, just as a hype machine, just as an episode in and of itself. It's great. The problem is, of course, with the whole is like where we go from here could retroactively make this episode worse. Like, you know, Spyfall was kind of a smaller version of that, where I was like, Spyfall Part 1 is pretty good, pretty decent, but like if Part 2 kind of fails, then this part would be bad. It kind of was like not really like that, where like I really liked Part 2, but while also being a good episode and like better, it kind of also made Part 1 worse, because the parts of Part 1 that bled through, like the Kassavan and Barton and that whole plot, was like not as good, so it was like, it kind of made Part 1 feel a bit lesser. So maybe we'll have something like that, where like Fugitive kind of ends up being bad, but like the conclusion is still good, and the payoff is still good. Like the whole Captain Jack thing. Like, they said, oh, Captain Jack's not gonna be in this series again, right? That's an issue. Like, I really had an issue with it after I saw the episode. I was like, okay, I'm excited for Captain Jack. He was great in the episode. Like, it was phenomenal. He was Captain Jack in the episode. He was just great. He's kissing everybody. He's cracking jokes every 5 seconds. It was great. Like, just bangers, man. But like, I would really hate if they basically what they just did was, hey, I'm Captain Jack. You're excited to see me, right? I'm back, eh? You like me, right? Well, there's a Cyberman episode in the finale. Bye. Like, we don't see him again for a couple seasons, maybe at least in a special. You know, like, that's just an issue. Like, if he's not in the Cyberman episode, if he's just not involved with the rest of the series, separate from the special, that will be an issue. That would be an issue for me, especially because the special, I think, is gonna be like New Year's Day or Christmas, right? Which is a whole year from now. So to just bring him back and just a year later, it's like, hey, here's that Captain Jack episode, is a fail, in my opinion. Like, yeah. So yeah, but so as I said, it would just be retroactively worse if like some of the stuff, like, okay, let's get on the Roof Doctor, right? The Roof Doctor, I like her. I think she's fine. I it's just kind of like in a situation where like I don't know how to feel about her, and like just her existence, just her being there, because like the whole like she's pre-Hartnell thing, like if they don't do it well, like if they do it, like I feel like there's a way to do the pre-Hartnell thing where, well, you have like, it's like a just everything, you know, there was an original character who had, like, you could actually think about it. Maybe it's not, no, they do say it's the same Time Lord, because with the whole same brain, same person, they do say it's the same character. So I can't say it's like a mantle, like, there was another Time Lord that was like the Doctor and had a gun, had a TARDIS that looked like a police box and didn't use guns and wore colorful clothing, wasn't a renegade, blah blah. You could have done that. And then like maybe this Doctor kind of came in and kind of like redid all that while not knowing about that old Doctor. Maybe you could have done it like that, but they aren't doing it that way, and even still kind of ruined the Doctor, because it's like he's just copying / she is copying someone. So that's one way you could do it. You could also just have it be like there's an original Doctor with 13 incarnations, and then they died, and then they brought the Doctor back, maybe for some purpose or something like that. But like maybe it was like the Master were like in End of Time, right? They brought the Master. They like was it End of Time or I guess it was End of Time. They kind of like showed it all. They like revealed it where like they put the ringing the drums in the Master's head so that they could use it as like not a tracking device, but like a beacon to the universe, so that once the Time War happens and like the prophecies are fulfilled that like Gallifrey is gonna be destroyed, they use him like and the drumming in his head as like a signal to come out of the Time War. Yeah, I that's how they did that. So you could maybe do it like they brought the Doctor back so that in future the Doctor can rescue Gallifrey and stuff, but then like it gets destroyed in the series. So that point is moot. I don't know. There are ways you could do it pre-Hartnell. There will still be problems, but like if you just do it as like this is the Doctor, it's the same. Just same everything, right? But like they reach their 13th incarnation, and then for some reason they regenerate it into a boy and lost all their memories, and just coincidentally started their whole life back. Like if they do it like that, where it's, like Ruth is maybe like the last of that original 13, and then she regenerates into Hartnell. Like that's an issue. Like there, it's like everything you could do with her would just end up being wrong, right? Like, oh, she's from an alternate universe / timeline. It was like, okay, so why do we care? It's kind of that Orphan 55 situation again. It's like, why would we even care about her existence now? Because like she's from another thing. Like, you know, it's like I guess maybe you could, if they wrote it while they could do it. Like there's so many just like issues with like her Doctors, like, oh, she's between 2 and 3, and it's like, okay, but why? It kind of, yeah, it's just, yeah. I don't know what to say. She's just got her issues. I've just got her issues with her. But as a Doctor, I thought she was pretty good. She was neat, just as like a old school version of the Doctor with like an old school looking TARDIS, and like her morals aren't quite there yet, like as the new Who or even some of the later classic Who Doctors, where like she's more like willing to use guns and like tricking people into killing themselves, and like is more harsh and calls the TARDIS a ship instead of the TARDIS. You know, as just like a like if you could bring the excuse of like if there wasn't a a classic series and you started with the 9th Doctor and it's like, oh, this is the 9th Doctor, and then you never really know or hear about the classic Doctors ever again, you just kind of know there were 8 Doctors before 9 or War, and like maybe you say like the Time War, they erased his memory so he can't necessarily remember what if you could do it in a way to where like you could have her be a Doctor from like the classic series, would have been good, but like because that's not possible at all, there's just issues with just how she exists and the way she's characterized. Like sure, she's like a classic Doctor, but she has the police box, so like if she is pre-Hartnell, kind of like makes the whole police box thing kind of stupid, because it's like, oh, it's not just something that happened naturally, and we kind of just like fantasized it later on, like glorified it, romanticized it, there we go, later on, like, oh, it's a police box, but like in the beginning it was just kind of like an accident that kind of just happened. Whereas like if you have her be pre-Hartnell and already have the police box, it kind of cheapens everything. I don't know. Yeah. She was great though, and the episode, I'm kind of running out of time. We're approaching an hour, but just the episode in itself, as I said, was just great. Like the Judoon were fantastic. They kind of did their role perfectly. The Doctor was just honestly probably some better than some of the performances that even Tennant or like Capaldi or Smith or Eccleston or even other doctors, like that episode just for the Doctor is like even above some of like old doctors for me. Like before, for most part, it was like, she's good. This is a good episode for the Doctor. She's not better than the other doctors though. But like this episode, I actually felt like, she's actually pretty good here. She actually feels more like the Doctor and better as the Doctor than even some previous episodes of other doctors. And Captain Jack, as I said, was great, and I kind of like the way they did it, where they just kind of got rid of the companions and just stuck them with Captain Jack just to tease the lone side. Just as an episode, functional and just hype machine and just written well, is phenomenal. Like it's a wondrous sight. This episode, it's mostly setup, and if the payoff to the setup isn't good, then this episode will be a complete failure. But if the payoff is good, then this episode will still retain its. It would not only just be a good episode in itself, would also just be a great moment of Who. Where like these legendary things were introduced. It's kind of like the Silence in the Library kind of effect, where like, sure, it's a great episode, but we don't know about River. Now that we do know about River, and we've had this interesting kind of sometimes well done, sometimes not well done story with River that was well executed in places and had some good moments in places, that it makes Silence in the Library that more, like, it makes that more legendary in a way. Like it feels like important. It's kind of like the first episode where like the sonic screwdriver gets introduced, or like Empty Child, like Torchwood, and just every one of Captain Jack's appearances afterwards makes that episode feel more important and better because he was introduced in that episode, and his future appearances were like, it makes what Doctor Who is, that kind of thing. But like if it fails, like the explanation for her Doctor, and like if any of her other appearances are just not as good or just not good, yeah. As just an episode though, I'm tempted to give it a 10 out of 10, honestly. I really did like it. It was just like one of the most engaged I've been with I was the most engaged with that episode that I've been in the entire Chibnall era. There was honestly not even much fat to the episode. Like, everything was done well. Like, honestly, maybe you could like cut out All Ears Allen. Like, he was probably like the only character or like part of the plot that wasn't necessary, but he was just also just really fun and really entertaining, and kind of made the plot move in a way that would have been that worked. And yeah, as I said, the Judoon were good. The only issue I have with the episode in itself is just how that fight scene with the Judoon. It's not that it was necessarily like I think it's bad. I just think it's kind of ridiculous. I was just like, what am I looking at? Like, how is this, like 40-year-old human woman, who I guess maybe is an alien, and it turns out to be the Doctor, so that kind of makes it a bit worse, just beating the brakes off this massive, this not even just one, this group of massive rhino people. Like, that was a bit weird, but yeah. Anyways, Fugitive of the Judoon, a 10 out of 10. And I feel like the rest of the series has potential to be great as well. Like Praxeus, I'm really excited for. Although I feel like it has potential to fail, kind of like Orphan 55. I hope it doesn't, though. Can you hear me? Just before I started recording this, I saw something, like an article about Can You Hear Me, about some information that was revealed about that. So that's good. There's all the stuff, as I said, that Fugitive kind of set up that needs to be concluded now, and like at least progressed on throughout the series. The finales, two-parter, that could be good. There's the Cyberman. This is all good stuff coming, hopefully. But as for this first part, it had its weak moments, but its strong moments really shone through. They were really good. So yeah, that's my review of Series 12. This first half of Series 12. Yeah, I like it. It has its issues, but they're not as big as the good stuff. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video. And tell me your predictions for what you think will happen in the rest of the series, and tell me your thoughts on the first half of series 12 as well. Yeah, that's about it. I'll see you in the next video. Just recap: Orphan 55, 4 out of 10. Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, 8 out of 10. Spyfall as a whole, an 8 out of 10, but part 1 is a 7 out of 10, and part 2 is an 8.5 out of 10. And then Fugitive of the Judoon is just as an episode, a 10 out of 10. So yeah, that's it. Bye bye. Stroll on, baby. Baby! Baby!